Hello and welcome back to the podcast with me, Reuben Copley. The podcast where we dive into the questions that shape our lives and the ideas that define our time, taking science, self-exploration and personal reflection to unpack the world around us, looking to better understand our relationships, our motivations, roles and responsibilities to ourselves and the amazing communities in which we all engage, asking the fundamental questions we want to ask, and often the ones we don't. In today's episode, we have the great pleasure of inviting leading psychologist Dr David Tod of Lancaster University to peel back the complex layers of our body image. What is body image? What does it mean to each of us? And ultimately, in a world steeped in social media feeds and content, and with the ease of self-comparison, can we still really healthily engage with our bodies and enjoy our own bodies for who we want to be? Taking learning and understanding to unpick the stereotypes, challenge the preconceptions and comprehend the underpinning psychology and physiology of who makes us us. To find ways of how we can all work to love and enjoy our bodies and live our best lives. And just before we start today, we will be touching on some body image conditions such as anorexia and muscle dysmorphia throughout the interview. So if these are areas of sensitivity for you, then please check out the description box below for info on where you can access professional help and advice surrounding the condition. You have been warned. So without further ado, let's dive right into the podcast. Hiya David. So firstly, it's really great to have you with us today to talk around the subject of body image and the preconceptions surrounding it and kind of the science that underpins it. In this day and age, I really do feel the body image concept touches both performers and the general population alike. And so firstly, I'd like to ask kind of, if you wouldn't mind for us, just summarising what body image is and what are the factors that affect it.
Okay, so body image is your image of your body, funnily enough. But what it is, it's multi-pronged. So it includes not just our view, our thoughts. It also includes our emotions and includes our behaviors and includes our perceptions. So it's the total package of how we see, interpret and evaluate our body. So in terms of what are the things that influence it, well, anything can influence it, both internal, things about ourselves, perceptions about what we can do, what we can't do, what we look like, what we don't look like, and also things outside of ourselves, so parents, colleagues, peers, friends, society, all that sort of stuff, and social media, as we'll get to.
So it's kind of this idea then that body image is both internal as well as external sources that can influence it. I think personally for me as well, I feel body image is an ever-changing personal perspective that can potentially be easily changed or swayed. So sort of with this in mind then, do you feel body image is a particularly socially driven or more personally driven idea?
It's a personal idea that's driven by the social side of it. You know, we're all people that want to succeed. We all have needs that we want. We want to, feel competent. We want to feel autonomous. We want to feel related and connected. And our body is the vehicle by which we achieve those things. Our body is what carries us into social settings. Our body is what does things that make us feel competent. Our body, if we've got control over it, gives us autonomy. So our body is quite important to our lives. So the body mediates our interactions with the world. And so we want the best body we can have in order to get those things out of the world that we want, like love, respect, that type of stuff.
That's really fascinating too. So when you're talking and thinking about bodies and about your body, it sounds like you're obviously looking to create this best version, sort of most idealistic version of yourself, in effect, because that's what you're putting out there to the world, and that's the image that you want to portray. So I know in particular, especially in females, there's now more attention paid to tackling issues around negative or unhealthy body image. And a lot of conversations are had around what an idealistic body should and or I suppose shouldn't be, and also like kind of how that perception may be changing over time. I feel like these conversations are kind of challenging and changing public ideas for the better. But personally, as a male in sport, I feel like there is still much more stigma around the idea of male body image. So I'm kind of curious to hear your thoughts on this.
I think it's, I'll go back to what you talk about with the females. And yes, it is changing, but I think the change is diversification. You know, you hear things like, strong is the new skinny and that sort of stuff. And you get this idea that now the ideal body image for a female is to be, athletic and that sort of thing. But I would tend to disagree and say it's diversification. There's still females out there who want to lose weight and be as slender as they can. Eating disorders is still a massive problem in our society. So I think, rather than say that it's changing from one to another, I think it's more like it's diversifying to a range of different bodies that depend on the social setting that you're in. I think that's equally the same with males. There's some males that want to lose weight, there's some males that want to gain weight, there's males that want to become more muscular. It's all about what is the setting I want to strive and succeed in, and what do those other people out there want. I'll finally get round to answering your question. I think there is still a stigma around male body images. I think the stigma has to do with what we call hegemonic masculinity, which is this idea of what a male is supposed to be like. Now, male is supposed to be strong, silent, assertive, all that other stuff. And that doesn't give men the opportunity to talk and express and be open and honest about the way they see themselves. And so I think that's where the stigma stems from, is that, males, the gender stereotype creates this situation where males aren't able to be open and honest about how they're feeling about their body.
Okay, so yeah, is that when you start to move into the kind of term muscle dysmorphia?
Yeah, that's part of it. That's a huge driver because it prevents males from talking to each other and understanding what each other thinks is ideal.
Just to clarify for the listeners as well, would you mind just briefly summarising what muscle dysmorphia is?
Yeah, muscle dysmorphia is when a person feels they're insufficiently muscular. So they would like to be bigger. These are the sort of people that typically see themselves as quite skinny, not muscular, or fat and not muscular. Muscularity is the key idea here, and it's about an obsession. So, for example, these are people that will be thinking about their level of muscle, greater than 3-4 hours a day. So a lot of their waking time is focused on thinking how unmuscular I am, and also compulsions. So looking for ways and undertaking activities that will increase muscle. So, weight training, drugs, diet, all those sorts of other things that they get into.
Yeah, well, that's super interesting. So kind of it's where people are striving to achieve this ultimate idealistic body and sort of idealistic physique for themselves. So I suppose to go from there, do you feel like in the current situation we're in where social media is particularly prevalent and also influential, do you feel this is kind of a driver of these obsessive conditions, and does it have an influence on male body image?
I think if you look at the research, yes, it does. And for the most part, the research I've looked at, it sees it as fairly destructive and negative. Social media is just another way for other people to portray themselves how they want to be seen. So people are going to portray themselves in a flattering light, which might well be unrealistic. And we know that people will engage in, photoshopping and touching up photographs and that sort of thing so that they look really fantastic. The problem is if everybody's doing that, then everybody's creating a false image of what they look like. But of course, the person on the other end doesn't know that. All they're seeing is all these wonderfully, wonderful, beautiful people out there, not realizing that actually all that stuff, what they're seeing is a fantasy. And so they start to compare themselves against that, and they're going to come off negative. So I think social media does have an impact. Now, is it the biggest impact? You know, in my practice when I'm working with people, I think what has just as much or even more of an impact is the relationships with the people around us and how we get on. You know, if you have parents or siblings or peers that are constantly saying, oh, you know, you're too big, you're too fat, you're too skinny, you're not right, I think that is a much bigger impact than social media, all that stuff has an impact. But, you know, we're meant to be interpersonal creatures, and I think, you know, it's those interpersonal relationships that have a big impact.
Yeah, no, that's a fascinating insight, because I feel like for myself too, I'm partaking in lots of physical activity in different sports and in a gym environment, and it is a really good sort of community around me. But I feel like within that there is still this sort of comparative culture that exists. And as well, I think, like you say, social media, where it is easy to compare yourself to others, I feel does lead to this kind of like personal objectification, where you start to objectify your body, thinking, oh, I'm not quite at that level or not quite the same as that person that I maybe feel like I want to be or maybe should be. So I know you've kind of touched on it there, but when people are struggling with these ideas of body image, how does it affect the relationships they have with those around them, and the kind of that broader community?
Well, I think if we look at your community, Reuben, I think it's a really nice example. You know, in the fitness industry, personal trainers, that sort of thing, really highlights why image has such a big impact. Because very quickly, personal trainers and fitness instructors can start to associate how they look with success in their industry. And, you know, the idea, if you want to get big, go get trained by someone who's already got big. You know, this idea that my body is my business card. A very clear link between who I am, my body, and success in my industry. And that really gets at the heart of what body image is all about, is we're thinking about how does our body help or hinder our ability to succeed in life. So I'm not surprised to hear the things that you say. In the fitness industry, I think it's a very good example of how comparing ourselves with other people can lead to quite a high degree of unhappiness, because the fitness instructor, the personal trainer says, I'm not this, I'm not that, I'm not the other thing, I'm not like that person, I'm not like that person. I can't succeed in this industry. I'm a failure. When in actual fact, the range of clients that are out there and the number of clients that are out there who are looking for different things in personal trainers, it's possible to be successful in that industry, you know, regardless of, just because you don't look like the top fitness models doesn't mean that you can't succeed. So yeah. I think your industry is a really nice example about how the crossbreeding that goes with comparing each other can have quite a detrimental effect on how you feel about yourself.
So yeah, just building on what we've said there about the fitness industry, me and my girlfriend kind of really got quite deep into this conversation last night with quite a range of ideas and thoughts on the topic. We were looking towards the world of elite performance alongside the world of body image sufferers, and these issues that kind of lead on to anorexia or muscle dysmorphia. And what we were kind of identifying is that there appears to be a lot of traits that are associated with elite level performers that are also traits that become associated with body image sufferers. Things maybe like being incredibly self-disciplined, often kind of obsessively focused on a goal or routine. And I was wondering, kind of from your experience with both worlds, firstly, do you feel that this is the case? Is there similar traits? And then building on that, do you think there is a fine line between elite level performance and body image sufferers?
Yeah, I think what I would say, Reuben, is rather than thinking about it as elite performance and body image sufferers, is actually they go together. You know what I mean? What I'm saying is that things like eating disorders are of a higher prevalence in sport, elite performance. Those people have higher levels of problems than the general population. So I think it's not surprising you get to see some of the same traits around, you know, discipline, sacrifice, those sorts of things, even to the point of, well, I've conformity. My coach said I've got to lose some weight, so I've got to lose some weight. Or the structure of sport and weight-dependent sports. It's set up to encourage athletes to focus on their image and their body and their physique. So I think there's an incredible amount of overlap there. And in actual fact, many people might see eating disorders as a performance. If you have a look at things like the pro-ANA websites and pro-MEA websites where eating disorders are celebrated as a lifestyle, you get a very strong sense of you've got to be disciplined, you've got to sacrifice, everything is worth giving up in order to be a certain shape. So you see a lot of crossover between the two. And it comes back to this performance of trying to please other people in many cases. The elite athlete is trying to outperform others in order to win and get all the success that comes with that. The person with eating disorders is trying to overcome themselves as the opponent in order to achieve some outcome that they're going for. So, and the other aspect I would throw into that is competition, interpersonal competition. For example, intrasexual competition, where, people are trying to look better or as best as they can, so they look better than everybody else, so then they can get some goal in the area of romantic relationships. A guy, for example, might want to look as big as possible, as muscular as possible, because of the belief that if I look better than everybody else, I'll be more successful in that domain of life. So it's incredibly competitive, performance driven on both sides of the fence, but the fence is blurred because they cross over.
Okay, so that crossover is always there. So I guess to kind of build on that and to bring it back slightly from talking about the extremes of physical disorders like anorexia, instead I'm curious to look at kind of body objectification and this idea of trying to achieve a perfect body image. I guess what I want to ask, if that's done in a healthy way, is it an unhealthy goal or approach to want to try to achieve that body image?
I don't think it's unhealthy to want to look presentable. It's not unhealthy to want to look as good as you can. That's fine. I think that's, that makes sense. We need a level of muscularity in order to survive. We need a body that functions in order to survive, in order to negotiate with the world. So I don't think there's anything wrong with that. If I didn't look after myself and that led to poor hygiene, dirty clothes, smell, all that sort of stuff, well, I'm not going to succeed in being related with other people. So I think there is a healthy level. I think the question becomes, what is the extent to which striving for that impacts on other aspects of your lives? People with muscle dysmorphia, for example, will put weight training ahead of everything else. So they would rather miss the birth of a child, or they will, not address relationship problems if it's going to get in the way of their training. So I think the answer to your question is you need to look at what impact is it having on the other areas of person's lives. If a person is missing out on connection with other people, relationships, if they're losing jobs, if career aspirations are suffering, then I think you can say we have an issue here. And that also includes health. If it's to the point where their health is failing, then again, I think that's when you can say there's an issue here that needs to be addressed.
Oh, okay. So taking it kind of from what we're talking about there, we're sort of saying that it can be good to have a goal, but it's about knowing, I guess, the motivation towards the ultimate goal. And therefore, if you do end up sacrificing kind of everything in your life around you in order to achieve that goal, then maybe you have sort of crossed that fine line, and in doing so, potentially, I guess, do open yourself up to becoming more unhealthy and kind of developing those kind of, well, less beneficial habit, should we say, for yourself that does ultimately lead to deterioration in your kind of well-being and your overall health. So taking it back from there then, and kind of more towards how social media might influence body image. There's quite a good movement, I feel, at the moment that's around the kind of hashtag body positive movement. And this is where people are getting much more aware of the idea health can look very different on everyone, and that there isn't really an idealistic body type, and instead it's much more about what works best for you and for your individual body. So from this, I kind of just want to ask your thoughts really on how you feel platforms like this, whether it's kind of an Instagram or TikTok, Facebook maybe, might be influencing people's body image.
I think in the same way that other, attempts to try and address body image issues works by trying to help people understand and realise for themselves that they can be successful, they can live the life they want to, they can have the friends they want to, they can strive for jobs and all other things that they want, and it's not solely reliant on the way they look. So the reason why, body positive and all these things on social media can be helpful is by helping to raise people's awareness and help them to understand that body image, although it's an important part of who we are, doesn't have to be the most important thing.
Yeah, okay. So do you feel when you look, obviously there's quite a broad spectrum of social media and how social media influences people. I know it is a complex world and a complex topic, but do you feel social media does then have a place in helping to educate and inform people of positive body image outlooks and approaches?
I think it's a start. I think it's a useful start. People becoming aware and being open and learning about the idea that things can be different is really important. So I think social media has a role to play in helping people develop that awareness. It could also have a role in helping people to experiment and start to work things out for themselves. We know that education on its own doesn't achieve the changes that we would like to see. I think changes that we'd like to see happen as people start to grapple with this idea, they start to see it for themselves. So, for example, when I'm working with a person who's got a body image problem, a really common one will be a guy who thinks in order to get a girlfriend, they've got to be this muscular person. And as an experiment, one thing we'll do is we'll get them to go out and talk to some female friends and ask a simple question, what is it that you like in a guy? And, I've had clients come back and say things I was really surprised. Appearance wasn't the only thing. There were these other things that these people liked. So I think if social media can be interactive like that and allow people to play with and experiment with these ideas, then it can be really helpful.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting, and I really like the example there that you've used as well, because I think it kind of brings it back to the more everyday. Because I do think often people do think like, sports or these like catwalk models and stuff, but to apply it to maybe someone that is like looking to go into a relationship, I feel is something that's much more relevant. And I kind of personally feel like, for me anyway, I think I've always thought as well, potentially body image issues isn't something that really touches me. But I think when you actually reflect on what you've grown up with and maybe the thoughts you've had about yourself, I feel like it is a topic and it is an issue that does touch everyone, whether it's kind of on a personal level or whether it's the people close around them. Everyone can relate and does have some degree of involvement. So yeah, to kind of begin to conclude then, and with that kind of area in mind, I was wondering if you had any advice around what those who are suffering with body image issues can do, and then more broadly, what kind of a society as a whole and what we all can do to help promote realistic ideas around beauty standards and body image perceptions.
I think a really good place to start is to talk to each other. If you've got a person that's got a real deep-seated issue, they need help, and so counselling, psychotherapy is perfectly fine way of being able to address that issue. If that issue is then associated also with physical behaviours that are bordering on eating disorders, then definitely medication, interaction with health professionals is really important. But, if we step away from that and we look at the run-of-the-mill, not the run-of-the-mill, we look at the general population, then talking to each other, becoming aware, just the mere fact of beginning to realise that everybody has these thoughts, everybody has these worries, everybody has anxieties, can be quite helpful, because then you realise, you're not special, you're not unusual, you're not strange in any way. You're a normal person, and if other people can start to deal with this, then there's no reason why you can't deal with it. So I think that's really important that we make this a topic that we're willing to talk about and be prepared to talk about. But more than that, because we don't want to become a society of victims who go around saying how bad I feel, is looking for ways in order to change and develop those things, in order to address change and improve the things that are hurting us. I worry about this idea that we need to be a more open society and address these things. Well, yeah, that's true, but we also want to encourage each other to make change. We don't just want to sit there and spend all our time in a focus group saying how terrible I feel. We also need to be encouraging each other with appropriate support to address those issues, make differences, make changes, so that we can then move on, work through that, and start achieving the happiness and things in life that we would like.
Yeah, no, thank you. That's really resonant, and I think kind of resonant to everyone really, and I think we can all really relate and kind of see that at somewhere within our lives. Thank you so much, David, for your time to just sort of talk to us today and to share your insight into the body image topic and kind of how it affects us and affects us all. I really do, and I'm sure the listeners will too, kind of value and really appreciate your insight. I think there has been something there that we can all take away to help boost ourselves and to boost those around us and just gain a better understanding. So with all that, thank you so much again for your time today, and we'll wrap it up there. Wow, nice one all. Thank you so much if you're still with us at this point in the podcast. I hope you found it as eye-opening and thought-provoking as I have. I think body image is such an important and complex topic, and I really do feel it touches us all in so many different ways. So I really hope we can all take something away from this. If you do feel stimulated and engaged by any of the content we have covered today, I really do urge you to look further and continue to explore your own body image and the image of those around you. So many fantastic resources are out there, so go along and follow the #bodypositive movement and see what it's all about for yourself. Likewise, for any podcast lovers among you, the Body Podcast on Spotify is a great resource full of tips and advice around embracing and loving our bodies. On the converse, if you have found any of the topics we have covered today challenging, I also urge you to check out the NHS website, where you can find lots of great user-friendly information on all the conditions we've touched upon today. Links are in the description box down below. And finally, let us know what you all think. Do you agree with David? Has this challenged any preconceptions you may have had? Or do you have an altogether different opinion or outlook on the topic? Let us know in the comments down below, because we'd really love to hear from you. So with that, from me, thank you so much again to you, the listener, and thank you so much to David for this wonderful insight and time to share his knowledge with us. Hope you've all enjoyed, and I'll see you at the next one.